Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, how are you today? We hope you are all always healthy and happy. Okay, we are from Group 1, who on this occasion will present the results of a journal review with the title Public Finance, Public Goods Provision and Government Responsiveness, Evidence from Rural China. Okay, for the first part, will be presented by me, Alifia Friska Aryani, with study number 23 from the Excellent Class Economic Education 2019. Okay, let's get into the background part of this journal. The first background is the existence of fiscal transfers from higher government to local government. And then the second one is contribution and benefits provided by a local government to increase the provision of public goods through this fiscal transfer. Before we go into general problems, I will explain a little about what a fiscal transfer is. So, fiscal transfers are a common government tool used in the centralized country to carry out economic development and the provision of public goods in less developed areas. The decentralization process generally delegates authority to local government to provide public goods or public services. The fiscal transfer of the government can make local government fiscally dependent on a high level of government. This dependence may lead local government to favor high-level government priorities while compromising their responsiveness to local population. Thus, as villages become more dependent on fiscal transfer, local government will provide less public goods to villagers and more private goods to village elite. In another sense, instead of being used to provide public goods, fiscal transfers can also foster political favoritism, corruption, and waste of resources. Previous studies have shown that politicians seek electoral gain by sending more transfers to places with more voters, partisan partners, or co-ethnic than to less economically developed area. Thus, in the absence of electoral incentive, we might believe that government transfers are more likely to be used to increase the provision of public goods, especially in less economically developed parts of a non-democratic society. Then, here are the research questions from the journal. The first is, does increasing fiscal dependence make the provision of public goods in China's village decline? And then the second one, how is the satisfaction of the villagers in the use of public goods provided by the village government? And the third, is there a significant correlation between the level of expenditure and fiscal dependence in the following year? Thus, this journal aims to knowing the level of dependence of the village government on fiscal transfers can reduce the provision of public goods in China's village, and then knowing the satisfaction of the villagers regarding the responsiveness of the village government in providing public goods, and also knowing the significant correlation between the level of expenditure and fiscal dependence in the following year. So that's all from me. For the next part will be explained by my friend, Tika Febriani.
Hello my friend, my name is Tika Febriani, my study number 29 and I'm from Excellent Class.
The next material is public finance in rural China. In the early 2000s, villages had three main ways to generate income from within the town. Number 1, profits from village-owned enterprises to finance village government. Number 2, leasing equipment and natural resources such as land, ponds, and mountains, known as one project, one decision funding to finance government operation. And the last, collect financial contribution from villagers to fund public projects in the village. Alternative local revenue from outside the village comes from higher level governments entities through two mechanisms, namely special allocation and general fiscal transfer. Specific allocation should be used for certain purposes such as primary education. Otherwise, general fiscal transfer can be used in any way the village government deems appropriate. The next is data and research design. This study used an empirical analysis based on 3 waves of the Chinese household income project survey, wave of 2002, 2007, and 2008, including village-level data collection and the household survey. Researchers combined the 2007 and 2008 wave of chip data and from a 3-year village panel. This panel dataset is the primary data used for the empirical test. The primary explanatory variable is fiscal dependency, which is measured as the proportion of total village income in a year from fiscal transfer. The researchers used the log of village government spending on public goods to measure the level of public goods provision in the village, and used the record of village expenditure per official on wage and welfare of village official to measure the private good given to local elites. The next about identification strategy. Researchers used the following estimation from two test hypotheses. The researcher also include several village level times variance control variable to reduce the bias of the omitted variable. Identification strategies that use fixed effects only use the variation of fiscal dependence within the group for empirical tests. In addition, the researcher also conducted a quantitative test of whether village level variables were related to fiscal addiction in the fixed effects model. The next material will be presented by Sarifatun Khasanah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, I'm Sarifatun Khasanah with student number 34. I'm from Excellent Class 2019, Economic Education Study Program. Table 2 shows the primary results of the provision of public goods. In the table, it can be seen that the coefficient of fiscal dependence remains negative and statistically stable. In addition, the magnitude of the effects needs to be considered because when fiscal dependence increased by 1%, the supply of public goods decreased by 16%. Thus, the hypothesis of this study proves that an increase in fiscal dependence reduced the provision of public goods in Chinese villages. Then, Table 3 shows solid results for alternative measures of outcome variables, such as expenditure on public goods for each household or each village in terms of years. In this table, there are similar results to Table 2. In the Table 5, the same is true. There is a negative correlation between fiscal dependence and the provision of public goods, such as roads, schools, and irrigation. Next is related to provision of personal goods in Chinese village. In this study, fiscal dependence is considered to weaken the response of the village government to the population. Village government tend to use public funds for their interests, and of course, it is profitable for them. It can be seen from the existence of fiscal dependence, which increased the wage and official allowance of village official. And then I will tell you about alternative explanation. There are 3 aspects. First, sample selection, political connection, natural disaster, and former rural institution. Second, reverse causality, and third, competent official. Researchers have not been able to test all of them thoroughly on sample selection, political connection, natural disasters, and former rural institutions. Therefore, many think whether this research is valid or not. Researchers here use the Oster coefficient stability test. The test shows that the omitted variable bias is unlikely to reverse the results. Researchers also conducted village surveys. Political connection is measured by whether there are villagers who work in the district government or not. Informal institutions are measured by the presence or absence of customary organizations, responsible for traditional weddings and funerals. In addition, in the survey, researchers also questioned villagers' stratification in the use of public goods provided by the village government. The result is that villagers are dissatisfied with primary, secondary, and village clinic services due to fiscal dependence. Related to reverse causality, one might assume that the results are driven by backup causality. Perhaps villages with lower public goods provision and higher village government private goods may become more fiscally dependent on municipal government. The researchers conduct a reverse causality logic test by examining whether the provision of public goods and the expenditure of official wages in the previous year. There is no significant correlation between the level of expenditure with fiscal dependence in the following year. Then, competent official. Another alternative explanation that official wages and benefits are higher in fiscally dependent village is that the village employs more competent officials. To test this, the research used a survey of households by questioning their perception of the competence and effort of village officials. The variables used are income growth, spokesperson, and mediation. In the income growth variable, it is measured how much effort the village government makes to increase its citizen income. Spokesperson measure how much effort the village government makes to channel the aspiration of the population to higher level of government. Population's aspiration was measuring the extent to which residents think that the village government has been able to mediate conflict. Of the three measures of competence and effort of village officials, it was found that fiscal dependence was negatively correlated with resident stratification. If there are fiscally dependent villages that have spent more on official wages and benefits, but residents don't think that the officials are competent or hardworking, contrary to alternative explanation. Mechanism: fiscal dependence leads to less provision of public goods to villagers and more private goods to village officials. There are two mechanisms behind this. Reliance on fiscal makes village government less responsive to communities and more responsive to higher level of government. Compromise responsive to people. High fiscal dependence means that villagers are not subject to heavy tax by the village government. This results in a reduced response of the village government to the interests of population. Table 4. This table shows that residents in fiscally dependent villages were less likely to participate in or care about village governance. The next material will be presented by Cria Agmilani.
For the last part will be presented by me, Cria Agmilani, the student number 27 from Excellent Class Economic Education Study Program. Let's get it. Then about one project, one discussion, or OPOD, is a form of village funding that requires village resident approval for its use. This funding does not reduce the provision of public goods, nor does it increase the provision of private goods to village officials. OPOD funding relies on the direct financial contribution of villagers to the village budget when it needs funds for public development projects. Science villagers directly decide how much money to collect and what the OPOD funds are for. OPOD revenues are more likely to be used for the provision of public goods. So far, in column 1 and 4, we see that villages that are more dependent on OPOD funding measured by the share of village income. For OPOD funding have spent more on public goods and less on official wages and benefits. As another piece of evidence for the compromised responsiveness to villagers, so that pernicious effect of fiscal dependence on public goods provision is mute in villages where residents held elections to select their village head. Then about election and fiscal dependence. The adverse effect of fiscal dependence on the provision of public goods were mute in village holding elections to elect their village head. In 1998, the central government required all villages to elect their village head through competitive election. In 2002, dataset report that 20% of villages in 1998 and 14% in 2002 not hold village head election. In the table 6, indicate that the effect of fiscal dependence on the provision of public goods in villages that don't hold election is negative. For the table 2, we know that fiscal dependence does not affect the provision of public goods in villages holding election. Then part about misplaced responsiveness to the higher level government. Fiscal dependence makes village government more accountable to city officials, but city government don't pay attention to this. City government is further strengthened village government by introducing fiscal control policies. Because of the misuse of the village budget and the embezzlement of funds by village cadres, one of their efforts is the reform that the city government will oversee the village government bank account. In Table 7 shows that villages that were more fiscally dependent were not more likely to establish direct fiscal oversight by the township government, but collect more extra kit fines and agriculture tax for villagers. The next part is about a conclusion of this journal. Fiscal transfer can create a form of fiscal dependence on higher level of government that fundamentally change the response mechanism of local population. In China, the allocation of fiscal transfer does not get electoral pressure in the sense that it does not get pressure from the electoral process. Reliance on fiscal transfer can reduce the supply of public goods and encourage power struggle in China's villages. The mechanism for this is, first, village officials with a higher level of dependence of fiscal transfer are less responsive to village. And second, fiscal dependence has shifted village official attention to support the policy preference of city officials at the expense of village. Then, dependent on one project, one discussion, OPOD fund in fact provides more public goods and less ransacking activities from village officials. Fund OPOD donate and decide by villager provide more public goods and less ransacking activity from village officials. Similarly, in villages where elections were held, the negative effect of dependence of transfer are disappear. Our team recommendation of the journal is strict regulation and severe penalty. Example, the death penalty are required to implement fiscal transfer to prevent the misuse of funds by officials. Then about the positive critique of the journal is the author provides fairly complete data in conducting research and explaining the conditions that occur in the implementation of fiscal transfer to the region. Then about the negative critique of the journal is some of the analyses carried out by the author do not explain the significance of the implementation of fiscal transfer because doubt about their validity.
So that's all the material that we can convey. If there are deficiencies or mistakes, we apologize. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.